All right, well, it's
Yeah,
6:30, so we'll call the meeting to order, and, do roll call. I always think it's funny when we're in a little small meeting, having a roll call, but you can tell us who's here, and we don't necessarily.
Well,
say-
it appears that everyone is here except for Aaron Ferguson and Marcel Brocci.
Right, and we knew Marcel wasn't going to be here, right?
Right.
And then Aaron
Oh, it's
was a
smart.
maybe.
You told us.
So thank you for joining us, Tyler, on the screen. And
Thanks
anybody,
for having me, as always.
yeah, not a problem. We can do public comment. Won't see any public in the back of the room. Do we have anyone online?
There's no one online.
No one online. Okay, that's the public comment piece. Next is the approval of the minutes. You know, it's been a while since we've met with new election and getting priorities, council priorities
I'm
and
like, oh yeah, I had surgery on that day. It's like, why wasn't, yeah.
and things like that. So, but any things, give you a second to. You reviewed the minutes from back then.
So since I was absent, am I allowed to vote on that? or
We'll
do I
just say
abstain
abstain
that?
from it.
Okay,
Yeah. That's just always best.
that's what I thought.
Are there any adjustments to the minutes? There are none. Give me a second.
Sure.
Someone's ready. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the Wednesday, August 14th, 2024 meeting.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll say.
I have a motion and a second. All those that approve, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. And wait, one,
I'm gonna abstain as
and
well.
I forgot, and those abstaining, we have 2 abstentions.
Okay,
Sorry,
Rich Sheldon and Chris Jones.
Did you do a roll call?
I did, but I didn't go around the room. I thought it was
Perfect. I'm good.
kind of silly, but anyway. Public time. All right, well, new business and want to introduce John and do you want to introduce or do you want to just talk about yourself or?
Just very briefly, so, you know, and I don't know if the mayor wants to talk about it, but so the city council had a goal to basically kind of redouble our efforts on economic development and kind of supplement our staff capacity to get that done. And so we, after doing a request for proposals, we contracted with John Lagarza of Healthy Sustainable Communities, right, John?
Yep.
And John does a lot of work, similar economic development consulting services in other communities. But I'll let him talk about that. So anyway, this is John Lagarza, and we're very happy to have him on
Yeah.
board working with us.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you. Pleasure to be here this evening with them. Some of you at the city council meeting here, so glad we're having the first Economic Development Advisory Board meeting again. So that's great, and I appreciate the chance to talk with Jeremy and just kind of think about, you know, tonight I'd love to get, you know, a couple things about like timing of meetings. You know, I think we talked about, you know, you guys were had the meeting around 6:30. The frequency of the meetings, those things are important too, right? And then if there's other things that you would like to see on the agenda that were maybe on the past, we'll get that put on there as we move forward in the future here too. I did talk to Jeremy and we looked at the agenda, and one of the things that he talked about that the staff would always kind of do is give an update on what's kind of happening with some of the businesses within the community here. One of the things I thought was really impressive is, you know, the La Creperie building here in town was purposed and, you know, and the URA had actually invested some money in that and put in that patio in the back there. It's a pretty successful story. Suzanne Jackson, she ended up buying that building and went in with Mount Pizza, and they opened up Memorial Day. They worked with the city. It was great working with the city and their staff and getting their permits and process, you know, going through that. But they opened up Memorial Day weekend and with 10 employees, and they had over 50 people in line coming in to get pizza. So it's been a very successful opening for them. The other thing too is that with so much business in demand, she's had to really figure out, she's up to 20 employees. So, you know, it's a great story for Sandy on, you know, when we think about some of the challenges that we're gonna talk about tonight is how to adapt to reuse on facilities or buildings, right? And this is a story that's important to when we have people coming or looking at some of our vacant properties or thinking about investing in Sandy. This is one of the best news that we could have to tell the community, right? Or someone coming in to looking to open up a business. So it's a great opportunity for kids that are in high school or young kids to have a good summer job or jobs in the summer. So right now, Suzanne and her family, you know, there's family owned business. They're trying to figure out, you know, what the flow and volume is, you know, for the staffing. But these are the kind of stories that when we, again, think about these vacant properties, you know, lessons learned and how the city was supported. And, you know, going forward, she'd love to have, you know, maybe some music events there. So thinking about like how we continue to kind of program that area and work our way up the street, up that side over there is a great opportunity with that. So I'll try to, Jeremy, point is to come in and, you know, bring in some of the latest and greatest business news that you all have, so you can share that with your community too there. So.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And why don't we go around the room to introduce ourselves and who we are and what kind of relationship, I guess, we've had with the city? Because we all have some type of background, right? And that way you can kind of get to know, I know we're missing a couple people, but we can catch up on those people later. But why don't we start on this side?
We met before. My name is Chris Mayton. I'm on the city council. I've been on the city council for a little over 3 years now. I was on the planning commission before that for 5 years. I've been living in Sandy since 2005. I have 4 daughters. 2 have gone through school all the way from kindergarten through high school in Sandy. And now I'm an empty nester. And yeah, that's me. And I've been on the Economic Development Committee for 3 years.
Well, pleasure to meet you again.
Thank you.
We met at city council as well. I'm Rich Sheldon, city councilor, started my second term in January. We moved here in 2011 and have 3 kids in the same school district. Mountain.
High school age or,
You know, I got grade school, junior high, and high school.
okay.
That got spread out well.
One in each sector.
We keep an eye on all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Bill Schwartz. I'm with Boring Brewing Company down at the bottom end of town, just inside the core. We've been here 6.5 years now.
Nice.
So I don't know what else. to
Time's
say.
flying. I
Got
remember visiting you when you were out.
Right now, we've got
Boring.
activities 5 out of 7 days. And I just found out I get to have food trucks come in, probably gonna do those on Sundays. And I've
Oh,
got a
that's
mobile
awesome.
bookstore that wants to come in and
Cool.
be in the parking lot, just trying to do unique things in the area. We do live music every Saturday night, but
Okay.
I know other places in town have kind of the same gig going on different ways, but I am the only brewery in town, in the area. Closest we have other than me is Estacada. So, I mean, we're also making root beer, ginger ale and lemonade, so it's not just root beer.
That's cool.
Yeah, here's good.
But can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Live music, do you guys have live music still?
Pretty much every Saturday at 6 o'clock.
Awesome. We were just asking about that at our last meetings. People were asking, we're always having live music around town.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And actually tonight I'm missing open mic night, which is also live music. A little bit of poetry once in a while and really bad dad jokes so far. We haven't had a decent comic yet, but some bad dad jokes run around the room, but
That would be fun.
yeah.
Their live music's great with Timber State Saturday nights. Hi, I'm Darren Wagner. My wife and I have lived in Sandy about 10 years. We have 2 young children, a 4 and a 6-year-old. Our oldest has just finished up kindergarten. We also own Wagner Travel and Cruise, which is a home-based business. I am the chair of the planning commission, so I've done that for a few years and this for a little over a year now.
What's the name of your travel business?
Wagner Travel and Cruise.
Oh. Okay.
I'm Chris Jones. I'm the director of the Sandy Area Chamber of Commerce. And gosh, I can't remember if this is my 13th or my 14th year in August with the chamber. I started way way part-time, few hours a week while I taught preschool here in town. And so I've been involved in a lot of areas around here and on the board of Sandy Helping Hands for several years until they disbanded this last year. And was just at a REACH meeting, our relationship established a cocktail hour earlier, and talking to some of the businesses or the bars and the restaurants around town about maybe bringing the CamoCon, keeping that going amongst them. So I think we might be putting out a meeting, everybody. I don't think the chamber's actually gonna take that on. It's a lot of work, but if we can help hold hands and get that happening for the community, keep it going, we would love to be able to be part of that. So.
Great. I'm Kathleen Walker. I have been around Sandy for almost 40 years and worked at the Mount Hood National Forest for most of that, and then got involved on the city council. I was kind of involved in just city politics and planning and city council stuff as a spectator and commenter, but ran almost 5 years ago for city council, got on city council and then ran for mayor. And my interest in being here is the opportunities that I think, what part of my background was working very closely with a lot of the businesses up in the Mount Hood corridor for the Mount Hood Area Chamber of Commerce, and really developing a lodging brochure, a mountain biking brochure, a hiking brochure, putting stuff on the websites so that tourists could kind of find out what was available up there. And then also kind of trying to do that somewhat on a much more limited basis here in Sandy. But what I really want to focus on is the opportunity to kind of get some of these long-standing vacant businesses moving in some direction that fills those vacancies. And, we've got the moratorium for a little bit more. So how can we kind of pick that low-hanging fruit and, again, focus on the existing businesses that we have that are vacant, but also kind of plan for what we'd like to see on the investments we've already made at Bell and 362nd, some other places, and just really maximize the partnerships between the city and the businesses to kind of make us a strong, economically successful community.
Thanks. So I'm Jeremy Pietzel, and I've already introduced you to a lot about my background, and everyone here kind of knows that, but been living in the community with some things you might not know, living in the community since like 1978, 79. I was a kid back then, but moved to inside the city limits 24 years ago, 25 years ago, with inside the city limits, just outside the city limits. But just love the community and has longtime city councilor and on the planning commission. But when we started the Economic Development Board, there was just one of those things that a few of us on the council at the time really wanted to really have a focus, because we never had a committee for economic development. We had tours board, and I was on the tourism board at one point, which was small and was basically the lobby for some grants from the county for that. But other than that, we didn't have that. And so we started this right before COVID, which then we had a lot of steam. And then, in January and February, and then, in March, we all know what happened. But we still believe that there's a huge focus on that. But I have 3 kids. My oldest will be next year a senior. I'll have a junior and a freshman. So all 3 of them will be attending Sandy High at the same time. Yeah. And sportings. And so, but anyway, so about that, but.
Hans Whipper, owner of Whipper Snappers Kids Play Place down at the far end of Tiffanyville.
I was wondering.
Didn't we decide that was West Sandy?
You're on the west side.
So we'll be 10 years open in November. So I've been around the mountain my whole life, lived inside city limits for about 10 years. Before that, between here and government camp. I worked at Ski Bowl for 28 years, doing everything from operations of the resort to public relations and risk management. I was on the part of the TIF board up there for the tax and finance for government camp that redid it. And I'm on the museum board for about 14 years, and then I'm still part of the road district up there. And I've been on this since it started. Just trying to stay involved in the community and just like to be, know what's going on and help hopefully push things in the right direction, because it's good for Sandy, it's good for me and for business too. Just want things going well. I have a 17-year-old daughter.
That's great. Well, thank you. I mean, it's really exciting to learn more about you, and it's exciting to see a city that has an economic and involvement of your mayor and the councilors here. I mean, that is important. As I talked about earlier last month, it's important that we all kind of row in the boat in the same direction and having the vision to be able to, communicate that to the business community. So it's really impressive when I come to town and I see that interest, right? And see the business interest and the business and the political interest there. So happy to be here. So thank you.
Yeah,
Jeremy, do you want just a really brief background, like,
Yeah.
because you've worked in other
Sure.
communities and.
Yeah, so my background, I moved to Oregon about 10 years ago. My background is, I lived in Las Vegas for 30 years. I worked for a conglomerate family that basically we would go in and develop master plan communities, say from 1,200 to 1,500 acres. And we did that in Southern Nevada, Arizona, Texas, and California. We also were the owners of Cox Cable. We own the cable business there, Vegas.com, and we're in the hotel gambling business. So we would take like 1,200 acres, master plan that, put in the parks, the infrastructure, sell that off to public merchant builders, and keep the commercial properties for, our own assets there, and then also for schools. So my background is working with communities and being able to go into places and help them find ways to, basically develop the infrastructure. I've touched a little bit of everything. When you do a master plan community, it's like building a city. So I moved here 10 years ago to help Multnomah County with, they have about 100 buildings on strategic assets. I'm looking at how they could reposition some of their buildings there. And then I worked out in Clackamas County with their economic development team here and worked with your folks here in Sandy, great team out here. Started COVID, I started my own business, and I work with some smaller communities here in Oregon and to the Northwest. We provide fractional economic development support. We also do strategic planning and community development. So we fill that gap where a lot of times it's, whether they need a full-time person in there or need help with strategic planning or having to figure out urban renewal modeling. So we do that too. We have a software program, and what we do is we go, and you'll see tonight, we did a little bit of data mining with Sandy to be able to look at what's happening here. So we really like to get at the granular level and we like to look at the numbers and really help cities make good education decisions from that standpoint. So it's always fun working with communities of this size because I've seen a lot of things and I think I can help bring a lot of knowledge. And if not, I'm able to connect the dots with other partners in the region. And a lot of times that's important too, to know like who the other actors are. So like when you're thinking about restaurants or retail or commercial or what it takes to draw certain characters into your buildings and industries here. I've touched that space, so to help you on that aspect. So happy to, I have 2 kids. I'm a grandparent. Second grandson is going to be on July 14th. So my daughter and my grandson, they live like 3 blocks from me. So talk about, this keeps me busy, but the grandkids keep me busy. That's the other part of my time. So I always wanted to get to the Pacific Northwest. It was just unfortunate in my career. It was one of the fastest growing places in the nation. Those were fast spots with a lot of development that was happening. It was a great experience. It was a great opportunity, but I'd always wanted to get, like you wanted to get to Fuji. I always wanted to get here to the Pacific Northwest, and I finally got here. So glad to be here. So it's a great place to be. Yeah.
right. Well, we can continue on with your
Yep. Okay, good.
presentation.
Okay, so one of the things we want to just do, and I think, was everyone at the meeting, the city council meeting? Are you? I was not. You were not. Okay, great. So one of the things that, working with Tyler and Jeff here and the mayor and the council, we wanted to really make sure that, re-engage in the economic advisory board here, that we would think about what could be the work plan to start with us working here from that standpoint here. So as you know, we talked to council. I thought we had a really good, healthy discussion, conversation about what the work plan could be for the Economic Advisory Board to be able to work on for this next year here. So basically, what it comes down to is, you know, talking about on this next page, you'll see the business communication and vacancy reduction, right? So we know we have on our two main thoroughfares, right? Vacancy that needs to be addressed there. And Mayor, you've talked about it. You talked about really having that personal touch, reaching out. How can we engage with those property owners or business owners and find out what do they want to do and how can we help kind of facilitate that, right? So I think that's a huge task for us to be thinking about how we can maybe approach that from, you know, your guys' position in the board, mine as the staff working with the property owners there. I'm going to stop there for a minute and just see what everyone has to say a little bit about that there.
I think some of these empty buildings have been years sitting there, and there's no, I was thinking about this, if there's some way we can push them into getting going on something like they have, what's it called, the SDC or the water sewer, what are they called, the units?
Oh, you're.
ERUs, so, okay, if you're not, I don't know if you can just like send them a letter and like a system upgrading, like a warning, then a citation, like, okay, you don't get something going by X amount of time, you lose your ERU. You know, just to help them get off their butt, if it's just sitting there not being used, someone else could use it. And that's just one idea, and I that may be too harsh, but how else are you gonna get some of these vacant lots moving? Maybe it could be one avenue. Because some of them just don't seem motivated.
Yeah.
I agree with what we just had to say. In fact, I also would advocate for and support, even beyond just the ERU, some code enforcement issues. You know, that really kind of force the property owner to either sell it to somebody that's more interested in it and then make that move forward, or face repercussions. But one of the things I hear, I interact with probably more people that live outside of Sandy than in Sandy, is like, you know, what is there? And it's a valid point when you drive through the town, all the vacant stuff, that doesn't really stick in people's mind. We have a lot of great things, some of it at like Cedar Park, which I'd also like to see signed and marketed better. Or enhanced, I should say better, it's new, maybe. But I think though, you know, that's our brand as you drive down the highway. And I think our brand has a lot of improvement to be made on, so that it sticks in people's minds, so it's not just a community with some food carts and a shelf with really good burritos and to stop at. So it's very nice.
One of the things that you can, in that's kind of what I want to hear from you all, is like, because I kind of believe in carrot, carrot, stick. When we're talking about the stick, we've talked about that ERU thing, and we're not sure if there's some legal repercussions about that, you know, kind of, what do you call that, takings and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things also, but in that same vein, is a vacant business tax, basically, you know, taxing them for their vacant business. Obviously, I want to see these filled, but I'd be curious what you think about that, Hans.
I mean, it could be a combination of things, just to start getting these guys to start moving on their properties, doing something than just sitting there. And I'm really curious of how we can afford to just let them sit there. Most of the time, you know? And I think along with that, it's kind of different vein, but just the appearance of the town, like I mentioned at the city council meeting, they did Proctor all the way down with the sidewalks and the nice trees and everything and lights, and then Pioneer going up doesn't have anything.
That's what I was gonna mention.
And I'm a big one for this. You guys have heard me say before, we're getting the power lines underground. We did that in government camp with the TIP district, and it changed the entire look of town along with the sidewalks and the lights, but the blight, the blight issue, so.
I would love to find out what their carrot is. And maybe it's not a carrot, maybe it's broccoli, because maybe they don't like carrots. You know, find out what's actually preventing them from having a business there? Is it the cost to improve the building? Is it that we don't have enough people coming through town? What is it that's actually going to change their mind to get a business in there or get a business, motivate a business to get in there? Because we can, you know, stick and carrot all we want, but if they don't, you know, we can't offer what they need, it's not gonna do any good. We need to find out what's actually causing things to stop.
I hear that, and I think by being on council a long time, you know, a couple decades of background of hearing the same thing over and over again, and what I hear David talk about all the time was, you know, we absentee family owners where the parents have passed away, now it's gone to a trust, you know, where it's now three people, you know, the brothers and sisters, and they live in New York and they're all fighting amongst each other. I think about some of the places down here that we finally worked for years to get through, that maybe some of that stick part of it being the tax, you know, in a way, call it whatever you want, there, it's all a tax in a way. But, you know, a penalty there that might entice the family to, you know, come together, because if there's that financial pain that they're having to pay, which we never looked at before. So that was one thing that I've never seen in 2 decades of looking at.
Yeah.
That, I don't know the legality of it, but I did hear recently that some other communities were doing that.
Or at least looking at it, yeah.
What was that?
I know that some others are looking at
Yeah.
it. Do you know that they've actually?
No, I didn't. And maybe it was you that were telling me some others were
It's
looking at
definitely
that.
being looked
or-
at.
Yeah.
I don't know, something comes to my mind about Happy Valley, but I don't know if Happy Valley has any vacant seats at all, so I don't know why they would. It's like they had a gas tax, but didn't have any gas stations for a long time. But anyways, I think that would be
Yeah.
something that might have some traction, you know, in that, and so. But
think also-
whatever we can do to get some of
Yeah.
those vacancies of that to turn over, because we've gone through, we know a couple of the landowners that have gone with a, we're being recorded, but anyway, have had people on the hook to buy the land, the business, and turn around and decide, you know, while they're in the middle of the, you know, towards the end of the discussion, go, you know what, no, I want $1 million more for it, you know, it's not really worth that, and then they turn away and not have, because they're a longtime owner in the community and they just changed, you know, and I get that, but I also think that there's more to the community.
I think codes, that existing codes could be enforced more stringently as well. So like, I don't know what the property, they used to be the old brewery, Salmon River Brewery,
Mhm.
and the backyard there, that you can see off Pleasant Street. Like, it was I know they've
And
done a lot
some
of
of
work
it-
to fix it up.
That's,
Yeah, some of it got cleaned up. I was.
Some of it did, but everything,
Yeah,
there's
but
more.
it's
And if
still
you-
there.
if
It's
you
still
keep
there.
pushing and start.
Well, that's the one-
fines,
Yeah,
you
the
know?
code enforcement could
Yes.
be the additional.
Right.
Well, and I know
So-
that lots of businesses want to go in there. I just heard of one last week. They even bought stuff thinking that, you know, they'd be able to get a hold of them because it's for sale. But they wouldn't even return calls and they ended up taking another business. I mean, they went and bought stuff to go into that thinking that they could buy that. And I mean, when the families don't, they put it up. So my thought is that penalty is if it's some of these families who don't want to sell it, but they put it up for sale. So it looks like they're trying to do something with it. How do we approach that? Or like, yeah, it ends up being more money when somebody actually goes to buy it. You know, I've been told that some of them are just waiting for the right type of business to come in. But they're not, are they going after those ones?
I
those
read that about the
businesses?
vacancy tax in other cities, that when they implemented it, that builders got swift a bit and took out permits, like they were getting ready to start the project, and then sat on it for the 3 years.
Mhm.
And it stayed vacant anyway. And then just before it was up, it's, oh, we went bankrupt. We can't do it. Now it's for sale again. And it would be perpetual leasing. I think that was the article I was reading was what they did in, it was in Washington, DC in 2016.
Hmm.
But they did make $9.4 million in vacancy tax.
There-
So.
Yes,
Um,
I mean, something.
The one thing about, I really like the ERU thing, but the one thing about the ERU is I hope that's a temporary, fix, right? I'd like us to look more long term.
Yeah, but see, we talked about ERUs at council, about ownership of that ERU, but that ownership is with the property owner who has the building.
Yeah.
The city doesn't own that, and you can't take that back if you don't own the property.
Well, I mean, we can debate that back and forth on
Right.
whether the ER, because it's a made up thing that some lawyer made up somewhere. But with that being said, still what I'm trying to say is, that's on the 5-10 year horizon. Hopefully ERU isn't even in the language anymore of what I do. But all of this conversation still will be. So that's again why I'm a big fan of the tax and the enforcement piece and kind of outside of just that, because I think that will have a more long-term.
So obviously you want to start with introducing yourself to the business owner and start there and then let them know, hey, this stuff might be on the horizon. You might want to get going. I don't know.
Also
To get 'em moving.
Yeah.
I was gonna say to Darren's point, the carrot and broccoli idea,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is we have an opportunity
Yeah.
with a fresh face to come in and
Yeah.
restart some of those conversations. And maybe approach them in a little bit different way with his experience and stuff.
Escalating
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
And some of those owners are now a couple of years older.
right.
What I mean by that, we go back to the Muffs place that was over here. You remember the Muffs place? We tore it down, when Scott Lazenby was still here.
Uh-huh.
It was just blight, but they were an elderly couple, like maybe in
Muffs.
their nineties or whatever. And the kids and,
Now the second generation has.
yeah, it's like, it was so bad that the city was going to, and then they ended up coming in and the kids gave them a vehicle to say, no, we're gonna take this over from you, mom and dad, because they just wouldn't do anything, and it was serious hazard to the community. But now everyone's kind of getting to that point, even the old Sandy River Brewing, and it was the lumber yard,
Yeah.
what it's called, Sandy Lumber.
Mm.
When you look in the window, and it just kind of, if you walk by, you look in the windows and you see all the stuff just piled in there, and.
It's like a museum.
So a long time
Yeah.
ago, many
It's
years,
a fire hazard too.
we had a program where they were trying to implement with David and is having fake storefronts in front of it, so you couldn't see into that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
I think you have, I think and so is John the person that is a good person to have do this and make contact with these folks, or, should the city planner, who's the best person to kind of,
Somebody
Honestly,
they've never dealt with.
that's what I was gonna say. A
Whoever
new
that
face
is.
in town, somebody.
Somebody that
Mhm.
they don't already have a idea of, oh, they're gonna do this to us.
Preconceived, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree 100%. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and I think, I appreciate you both talking, everyone talking about this, because I think what kind of hearing is a two-pronged approach is one is, this for our next meeting is to come back and say, okay, here's what the outreach was, and here's, interviews with these business owners, and here's our situation, here's our challenges, so then we can kind of decide, do we gotta give them a carrot or broccoli, or is it stick? And then I think to your point too, like Rich said, it's like, maybe we do some investigation on what some other cities are looking at. And what kind of legislation that would take to, enact a vacancy tax, or I do like the situation around, a fire hazard, because you could have fire inspections and stuff like that. So there might be some other ways to be thinking about approaching it too, but I think just be able to come back and work a little bit,
Yeah.
Jeff, and we could talk to, come back with a couple options to talk about, because I think we might find that some might just need some hand holding and some might need enforcement, right? So I think we'll do, and then maybe it'll be a good, healthy discussion and saying like, okay, if we do enforce, the vacancy tax or fire inspections, and what is the time frame? What's a good, to your point, like if they just go in and pull out a permit and they find another way to get around, it's like, no, if you pull the permit, you gotta have work first inspection in 45 days or something, right? A way that we can enforce it, right, from that standpoint. So that's what I think would probably work best for to come back, and I appreciate everything you share, because I think that could be, if you guys have some other ideas.
We identify the vacant properties in the core.
Yeah, the core, yeah, I think that's the
Focus
core
on
is the
that.
focus now, kind of focus on this. core.
Pioneer and Proctor.
Mhm.
we talk about buildings, and I know that we have the ERU thing going on, but what about vacant land? Cause we spent the last few years taking down blight buildings, some of our older buildings that where the veterinary clinic wants to build,
Mhm.
right, it has been. But we had a couple buildings in there that were torn down, and we helped them tear those down,
Yeah.
meaning giving them money to do so, because they needed to do that. But now it's just empty. But are
Well,
those ERUs gone because the building's gone? There used to be buildings on those. And do they still obtain an ERU because they were they were 100-year-old buildings.
All those
Yeah.
I
ghost
mean, before
ERUs.
anyone was counting
Yeah.
toilets and sinks.
Tyler's online. He's probably better at answering this than I am.
But we don't have to have now.
Yeah.
Well, I can just shed a little bit of light on that. So our code explicitly states that as long as the utility bill is being paid, the utility service has not been vacated. On those properties, Jeremy, that you're specifically referencing, I think we referred to them internally as the Connolly properties at one point, and then there was the one behind the old Red Boot branding building that we also tore down. Those had not paid utility bills for years, and so the utility service was vacated. They didn't have an active utility account. They didn't have an active connection, and therefore those ERUs just no longer exist on those properties. Several of these other buildings that we have that are vacant in downtown are vacant of a business, but they have an active utility account and they're paying those every month. They're in compliance from a utility account perspective. There's certainly probably some other code violations that they have that we could be enforcing, and some derelict building avenues that we could be going down. That is in the municipal code, and there's a pretty rigid path forward on how to address those derelict buildings. And so we could certainly explore that option more if the council wanted to provide that direction. But I think in the meantime, having John or someone else that is not affiliated with the city directly and not a face that some of these property owners have seen previously would be a helpful first step in engaging and having some dialogue about, what their hindrances are and where they need some assistance and how the city could provide some assistance.
And I would say that for the vacant properties that don't have any building on them or that we tore down or whatever, that's kind of not the top priority. I mean, for the short term, getting these vacant businesses that are still there is what's important. That said, though, when we talk about possible, condemnation or something like that of a building that isn't going to get, starts getting the fines and they're not planning to fix it up, and maybe there's some condemnation in there. I don't know, hard to say. What I would like to see going forward, though, and what we didn't do before, was we spent a lot of money, city money, to take down those buildings on the assumption, I think, that they would be redeveloped, and that never happened. And so,
So in
Before
the
we-
future, you should make it as part of
right,
the deal, like,
Exactly.
okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna help you take these down, pay for them, but you have to
right,
start building within X amount of time.
right,
Otherwise, you're gonna be responsible to
Right.
repay back those,
right, exactly.
that money.
Yeah, and that has to be part of the, that there'd be a lien or something put on there or something. So,
I do happen to know that property that they would really like to, but the cost of building has doubled and tripled since COVID, because I've spoke with them. And so now it's not having the funds to be able to build on that, even though they still want to.
are
So
we talking like the
one
veterinary
where,
clinic?
Or
Yeah.
trail.
yeah, because he and I spoke about that. Yeah. Unfortunately.
There's
just
trouble
the
getting
cost.
financing. for
Yes,
that project.
yeah, the banks won't finance it because it's tripled, and yeah.
One thing to that point, recognizing that things have changed financially. I'd be curious too, to learn how we can, especially in the corridor, use our urban renewal money to further enhance our downtown area.
Well-
There's things that we can do. That's something you've already thought that.
But since you guys brought that up and we talked about that briefly at the council meeting and, Tom and Jeff and with the mayor and the council and some of you were there. We did a little data mining, so I printed out with our software program, we were able to take in the data on what has actually been, really happening with your property tax value here, right? So with this heat map, and I think what would be, wanted to bring this here to have this discussion, and I think what could be really helpful is to really take a deeper dive into this area, and we could overlay the current urban renewal area and bring that back to really show Tyler and Jeff and the team here, like where the current boundary is and what we're seeing from the assessed values in these areas, right? And then I think also have a discussion, because I think what you'll probably say is like, some of these areas, to your point, Rich, that we could probably amend the boundary, right? And look at like where the boundary line probably could, better sit for the long term for the urban renewal. And then taking a little deeper dive probably on your programs, to your point, because I know you've had the storefront program, but a lot of, and I know the county discontinued their 3D modeling program, which was really helpful for people that have just a vacant parcel or help them kind of visualize where to go. But just revisiting like these areas that are, if you can see that are in the yellow, are just low increments that are happening within the city here, and you can kind of see in that core what's happening, and we can pull like the historical area. But then thinking about like, what are some of those programs that might need to be modified to help bring that area along, right? Some, I don't know if you have a tenant improvement program here or not, but you know, do you have that here? Okay, so I mean, you know, that's a good program, but I just would need to look at them and look at how they're set up and structured. And then some of it just might have to be acquisition and disposition, thinking of that strategy too. But I think there's a great opportunity to, we could do some more data mining, and if that's something that you think we should be doing. I mean, I brought it here, I know it's something you guys have all been thinking about, but to that point, I'll leave it there, so.
I just want to let you know, I reached down to zoom in.
Yeah.
With your fingers.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just, it's like.
So if you could email it to us.
Yeah,
like-
yeah.
I want to see it.
Right, because I'm like right now, if I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
We do know that urban renewal is all the commercial area in Sandy.
Okay,
So we know that the
All the way
C1, C2 commercial is all part of the urban renewal
mhm,
pieces of that. So you could follow along Highway 26 basically, and then the big yellow, or almost not all the big yellow of the Bell Street. South of Bell Street.
I think to like Tyler brought up, you know, I mean, we were talking, you know, should Fred Meyer really be in your urban, right? I mean. It's a logical, good question that we probably ought to vet out, right? You know, I mean, they're probably can afford to do their own improvements, you know, so it's like. That could come out, that those tax rolls can go back to the city and the other tax deed districts, right? But maybe there's another area or another way that needs to be picked up from that standpoint, is it industrial area? So I think really. Studying it at this point, looking at where it should be, what are the programs that, you know, what are some of the industrial programs? If it's just all commercial. Should we be cherry stemming down to look at some of the future industrial areas, right? So I think that would be. To Rich, that was one of the things in the plan here, so. I'll stop there when you guys talk.
Yeah, I think to Rich's point, and I've seen this in other communities, Redmond is a perfect example of
Yeah,
that.
great.
Purchasing, redeveloping
Yep.
that because it was not gonna happen
Yep.
or whatever with table pressure. And either turn around and sell it
Mhm.
there and have achieved what we need to do.
Yep.
To then bring up the value of the urban renewal, to take the money and do it again.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the whole point, when things aren't coming in that way, you know, sometimes you have to do that, and that's what Redmond did.
yes,
I've been on two different
very successful.
tours of them leading that of how they did it. So anyways, it's we talked about that in the past of different buildings too, but you have to be strategic, right? You have to, you know, or is it like parking is such a, you know, a need in a certain area, do you buy that? And I think if I recall from the last meeting, Sandy did buy the parking lot.
Yes.
Okay, well, I've been off for a couple of years.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think you voted for it though.
I think I was.
Anyway.
Anyway, but, you know, nothing on the other side. And is that what the stumbling block for some of the development is? Because a lot of these little tiny itty bitty lots, you run into a lot of red tape, and we've always known that some of the stormwater. I've heard, you know, people like, I can't develop that, it's too small, and the requirements for stormwater to keep it on your property, and there, you have no lot after
Mhm.
the square footage of it, right? Like, there's just, what are you gonna do with it? Unless you merge lots together to be able to do that. So some of that red tape keeping anything to be developed, and we could be here 50 years from now and still not able to develop anything.
Yeah.
Or redevelop something because it triggers a certain amount that you now need to put that on the property, and if you did, you'd have no parking space, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And so what areas of those are city code or whatever those that we can control versus the state, you know, regulations too, so. But it's good to look at those things.
And I honestly think, to the point of the Pioneer side, you know, doing some cleaning up there, or, you know, making it beautified like the other side. I love I think everybody knows. I love going through when the lights go up
Yeah.
at the fall, in the winter. I get so excited to see those lights. And I almost cried when they came down this year. I'm like, can't they just stay up all year? They look so nice, you know? But then you go on the other side, and that's a lot of people coming through our town, going up to the mountain. And that's their first view. When they're coming back, they're not paying as much attention and they're going down Proctor. So I would say from a tourist standpoint, that I would love to see that as nice as the other side, so they get the
Street
first
lights.
vibe instead of on the way back when they're tired and not paying attention. I think it would make a big difference personally.
I totally agree with you. If I recall from what I was told, because I asked for the same thing, why did we do one side over the other? Is just there was more right away sidewalk space, and so people going up and down like wheelchairs or
Okay, that
ADA,
makes sense.
you couldn't fit in trees or those
Mhm.
extra street, and it was always that piece of it.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
Why that happened on one side and not the other, because it's, if you notice, it's more.
True,
condensed.
yeah.
One's a state highway, actual state highway, and the other's a city road. Is my understanding too, officially. I think going down is state highway and coming up is an actual city road.
There's gotta be
It's,
some room
it-
for something.
So anyway, but
So I know there's been pushback from ODOT closing it off for a Christmas parade, right? On the Pioneer side? Or is that the Proctor?
well, we've
side?
done it on
Remind
both,
us.
we've done it on both sides, but.
But I know the Christmas parade, I was talking to Mountain Festival's princess, not the princess, the president.
So not to shut
And, yeah.
down the
So she,
idea,
yeah.
but
so
just
I'm
to
wondering which
kind
sides
of, what I
which.
remember the explanation to me when asked why we don't have the trees, why don't we
Yeah.
have that little strip going down there to make the sidewalk a little bit, it's because of the side.
But I
You
think
can still
there's,
do the lights and get the power lines underground.
I think there's things that we can do. I mean, we've got the hanging basket. I think there has been an effort to kind of, improve it. I think there's probably more we can do. We've talked about some banners and other things, but I think there's other things we can do to kind of improve that. The idea of kind of taking down all the power lines. I think we're talking millions of dollars. And so when we only have like $14 million to play with in our urban renewal, I'm not really willing to go that far, spend half of it on getting rid of the power lines, as ugly as they are. And that kind of brings me to the other point about this idea that buying properties and then developing them. And I guess I'm not totally on board with that because we don't have a lot of money and we already bought the pool property and we have those acres and they've been sitting around for a while, so we still have to have some decisions to make on that. But I think it's, we don't seem to move very fast. And so the idea that we think we can kind of buy property that a developer could have bought also and developed it, and somehow we could make it easier to develop or more attractive or develop it ourselves. I'm a little bit, like when I worked with the TIF group up in Government Camp, we had some, I don't know what you call, I guess I call them deep pockets, but you had RLK and you had Hannah, and they were able to kind of put the investment in to build the Collins Resort and the general store there in Govey and things like that to really kind of make that TIF, go. And obviously there was a lot of support from the TIF, they had, I think, $9 million total that they were able to allocate. So it was very helpful for the whole community, but they had some deep pockets to kind of do that development. And I'm hoping that we can at least, pursue that strategy first rather than spending our limited urban renewal on things that we haven't done before. It's a little risky. I'm just, I'm not saying that I wouldn't go there, but.
Well, the problems doesn't seem to be buying the properties. It's they won't sell the properties. So whether it's the city or it's a developer or it's whoever, it's kind of even worrying about buying the properties, kind of putting the cart before the horse because they're not for sale, really.
Well, we also own a piece of land right there, which is unpleasant, which is commercial that we could develop, right? And there's that piece of it. And I have to say, I hear what you're saying, Kathleen, but for 20 years, we've been wondering where these people will come in to do some of those things too, and no one has come in. So sometimes there's a synergy with some development that happened, and that's what happened over in Redmond too, where they did call them flip a property, whether it's a remodel of a thing that you do have someone sell it, or you kind of come into that approach there. But you know, we've been trying to do that same scenario for as long as I've been working with the city for 20 years, and we haven't had deep pockets come in and do that. We
Well,
were
I don't-
hoping
yeah,
for make minimums, we were hoping for all these, we were hoping for this,
Yeah,
but they just haven't come, and I don't know
Well,
if they will.
I don't
in the
think we
next
had the right
20 years.
people working on it. I think John's done that. Obviously, he's been successful at doing that. So that's why I think we've got,
So,
you know, much more talent to try to help us.
so I think
Move that.
you could also run it in both tandems, right? If you
Yeah,
did
you
find
could.
someone in deep pockets and you do this, there's the synergy of that too.
Synergy.
Because there's something happening, we're building, we're investing, and I think there's that piece of it. It's something to look at least, right? Because if we aren't looking at it, then we're just
No, I
saying
think
that
it's-
is not an option whatsoever. And
So-
obviously, it's up to the city council at the end of the day, and the urban renewal district board makes that decision. We don't here, but it's something that.
Yeah.
If we decide that's something we recommend to that group, then. that
I
can
think
be
that's.
one of it.
it's- To your point is if you guys recommended the council to, you know, look at the urban rural, study that and. You know, look at what other opportunities and programs and that could be initiated in that area. And that could be a win-win. It's a very, you know, cities don't have a lot of. Tools in the toolbox to work with, as you all know, but like the urban renewal is a pretty powerful tool for. Cities to be able to utilize, and to Jeremy's point, I mean, Redmond and other cities have. There's different ways to do redevelopment, you know, and still be. Very reserved, you know, the whole thing in development, you're trying to, you know, reduce risk as you go, so. And the city is a, you know, is a strong actor in a community to be able to look at some of these, the hardware store, like what could that really be? And, you know, it's a great asset right there in the community, I'm not saying that's one that we look at, but I'm just saying those are the type of ones that I'm seeing here, or the old Studebaker store, you know, like, that's a great corner location too, but it might be a chance for the city to take the lead and help move that through, to reactivate those areas, so push it a little bit, right?
Or where it will never be development because there's a cost, something that cost. Would cost us money, but otherwise it's gonna be there for another 100 years
Yeah.
because it needs some kind of brownfield cleanup. Right? That a business may not take on. Because it's just not, it doesn't pencil out for them, but for us, our penciling out is more about our community.
Mhm.
And what we have to walk by every time or not have
Long term.
long term, so. Gotta keep those in mind.
I have a question, just top of mind, because it's come up in the past on city council. Have you experienced cities that either bought properties to develop or bought businesses that were for sale to operate? Be successful as a revenue generation for the city? Or is it something that the city should stay out of and allow, you know, private entity to buy those businesses?
That's a great question. I've seen, you know, urban renewal agencies buy property and go through either. You know, agreements or eminent domain through that process there, and that can go two ways. Especially get on some of these sites that are cleanups, you know, but it's a way to get the property owner to. Understand who the best buyer sometimes is the city, because the city a lot of times is the one that can access the cleanup grants or the funds. Because we're a nonprofit agency to be able to clean the property, right? So a lot of times you'll see this on old gas station sites that, you know. They sit abandoned, they can't transact. They'll try and transact, you know, and that's a great example that I've seen that's been done with cities, where cities have gone in. Purchased them or gone to a name and then got the cleanup funds to do it. On the business side, that's a very interesting question, right? I don't know where your council is, and it'd be something that, you know, Tyler and Jeff would have to talk more with legal, but like. Urban renewal agencies can take interest in other forms of business entities, right? So from that standpoint, you know. If there was ever a thought of thinking about something like that, you know. It would be an interesting discussion. I haven't seen a city here, to my knowledge, that's done it yet, right, from that standpoint, but. When you think about like your outdoor tourism corridor, that what's happening here, right? I mean, it's a really interesting with the tourism outdoorsness that to. You know, recreation, right, around that area, around recreation, right? Like-
That's right, and I'm not picking on any business that's in
Well-
town, but I just think of like Next Adventures going out of business.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing, because when you go to Leavenworth, Washington, right? the city's done a really good job of like floating that river. You come in, right? And they have it all structured, you know, buses coming in, it's really run and organized. It's really, so when you think about, I love your idea, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, that's an interesting facet, like, you know, with Next Adventure, like, what would that look like? But that, you know, and it's a interesting conversation. I think it would be a little bit more research and discussion, and it'll come back and just to see what, you know, folks would feel about that there today, so.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had experienced that from other cities.
Well, recreation is so, you know,
It sounds
we're
like
at
you
the
have.
front of Mount Hood corridor going up there, and it's an interesting facet there, so.
Where I've seen it is like, well, we're talking about Chattanooga, you know, they didn't have a conference center. They wanted that in there.
Yeah.
No one would come in to do it, so they built their own.
Yeah,
And then ran it, and they could do that. you know,
exactly.
They will
Create
come.
your-
And, you know. ran
Seaside
it.
has theirs, the city of Seaside built their conference room out there, you know, convention center, it's a big attraction there.
So some of those things, looking at that, like, no one is building it for us, and we think this is, you know, the economic side of it, and do that. You can also buy land, you can build a bill and rent out the space in it too, because no one else is going to do it. If you don't have to sell,
Yeah.
it. But those
There could
are,
be a tenant, you know, we could be the landlord and we could actually have tenants, and there's a lot of cities that do that, and a lot of cities in their new city halls that, you know, structure that where they'll have retail components down there to help pay for the building, and that could be a great component from that standpoint. The interesting point is where you were thinking, and I was thinking that on the recreation, because with Next Adventures, we're in a recreation corridor, we're in a state that, you know, the issues with liability with equipment and everyone, but it is an interesting facet of thinking like, is that a bigger tourism? It might even be a bigger conversation like Mount Hood territories and, you know, the tourism industry to see like, what would it take for, you know, this area to have stopping in and getting your supplies and stuff, and, you know, what that structure could be. It could maybe be find an operator to lease it, and then, you know, just there's a 100 different ways you could put it together, but it's an interesting facet.
From a business standpoint, that's what I was thinking.
I thought, when I read that, I thought the same thing for Sam, yeah.
we also lost the autos
That's
too.
what I was.
Right, right.
So-
With the bikes,
So we're down,
And from what I've heard, Meadowlark's they get sold out all the time there too, for
Yeah.
rentals during
You
the
really have to
season.
think
So now
about, like-
that they're gonna be even more impacted.
how the city would, you know, staff that, what it would look like, and insurance, and it's a big discussion if we were ever to think about going.
or do you have?
I
a-
mean, I'm just
Tyler's
gonna
not
say,
gonna want me to
we're a
come
town
back
of
here
13,000
anymore.
people, folks. And we are stretched thin trying to do, you know, our sewer, our
Yeah.
water, our parks and rec. And I'm just gonna do a little reality check here, because those are great ideas for Chattanooga and other places that got buku bucks, but I'm not, you know, I want us to find Hillcrest Sports. I want you to be reaching out to Hillcrest Sports and all the other sports folks to kind of help fill that niche, because we can't fill it as a city. We are stretched thin, and that's not our role.
But what we're doing right now is just brainstorming
know,
and
I
dreaming,
know.
and so
I
I want to
know.
make sure
Thank you,
we're
thank
not,
I
you
appreciate
know,
that.
that, because otherwise there's great ideas that get
Yeah.
missed.
Well,
Well, there's a
So,
model like, let's say the city comes up with a grant or buys that building and then it says, okay, here's this building we want for adventure gear or whatever. You know,
then goes
cut the-
after Hillcrest.
and
or
here
goes
you know,
after-
no rent for 2 years or some kind of incentive that the city owning the property, you know, no property, something to help them out and get going and give a little like, oh, well, that would make it much more appealing to go to that spot than some other spot.
And,
some other
and,
city.
and to that, we did the retail, the business plan, not the business plans.
A
I'm sorry,
strategic plan.
strategic plans, and looking at what things our community want in this town, right? And so that
Right.
comes back to, you know, go away from the Next Adventure piece of it, but what other things that we aren't getting in our town that our business, our residents want, right? And how can we help attract that with John going out and pulling that in? But you can only do that if there's buildings for people to rent, you know, and so sometimes we don't have that.
Yeah, Sandy's kind of like, to a little bit of Kathleen's point, I feel like I grew up in a coastal town. I feel like Sandy's kind of at that teenage thing that some of those coastal towns are, where you have a lot of old history families and they don't want to let go of their legacy. Like, and that's hard. but it holds your city back. I just Googled McCall, Idaho. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
Yeah.
But it's a
Yeah.
population of a little over 4,000 people, has a huge tourism base, right? And it's not right next to the ski resorts either, given they have a lake during the summer, right? But it's not right next to it, but they do capitalize on that, very much so. And I think that we do have a main thoroughfare that everybody that's coming, for the most part, people don't come from the east too much up to it. It's from the west up. And so I think we really miss out on that. And so, you know, to be honest, if we did purchase, like in a pipe dream, if you were to purchase something, I don't think anybody's thinking about having a city employee run it. That's not what I'm hearing. But I do think that there's a lot of communities, one of them, when you mentioned that's a little bit ago, that doesn't have any vacant properties. That's exactly what they do. They're currently building a downtown area and they're not afraid to go in and eminent domain something to make it fit within their business plan. And it kind of, again, that's, I think, a huge policy decision that would have to be made because there is hurt feelings in that. But it does allow your city to progress and move forward. And then maybe at that point, once you take control of that, you have it shovel ready for the industry that you're looking to fit. And then they sell it off and then you roll that over into the next project. And so I don't know, I mean, there's far better business people out there, but I think that, and John's probably more, but I think you could do it in a business strategic way with advisement from people that are experts in this, that could sit there and say, that work with the businesses, but also have a good business plan and a project list that we could capitalize on. And then that becomes a business that is selling stuff. Again, people stop. Another thing we're missing is hotels. Like there's no place, I mean, again, you're right up the road
Nowhere to
from
stay.
there and there's no place to stay. You can go on about.
Yeah.
So anyways,
And that was one that we looked at years
ago.
ago. It was a
Yeah,
top
it's a goal.
priority for us in town and we almost had one. But yeah, another example. I think our ERUs run is the variable that really,
Some kind of conference center too. There's no place in Sandy to hold an event of any size inside.
There's nothing out this
There's
way. I get
nothing.
phone calls
You go, you have to go to
constantly
the
about
resort
it.
or,
Yep.
or down to Gresham, but there's,
Mhm.
yeah. there's
Well,
nothing.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Having businesses that get folks to stop in town is great. But how do we keep them in town?
Yeah.
We have to be able to hold them to, and that we have to look at that as part of kind of this overall grander plan that we're putting together. Because if they stop and go, it does nobody else in town any good. It does those two businesses that they stopped at and that's it. So having a conference center would be great. Even if we could convert kind of some of that area by Cedar Park and hold some summer festivals and concerts there or something to grab people and keep them in town. Would be awesome. Because that'll,
And we need
so
more
that's where the
retail.
city, like,
Yes.
okay,
Get
so the
people to
city
stop.
builds a conference center and that might be what tips a hotel into coming in. So,
Mhm.
oh,
Yep.
okay,
Yeah.
now
Good
we'll,
point.
now we'll come build a
well, because
hotel,
now you have
right
the
now-
people in town.
Right.
Yeah, and that, now you have people in town, it drives the price up on that vacant building that they didn't want to sell for that price because they wanted more, so now that they can get more for that building and folks start developing, it's all about the people.
So I want to take a time check here because we haven't gone down
You kind of jumped around.
the agenda a little bit there, so I think all great discussion is, not everything is gonna pan out and we'll find pluses and minuses and things and we're there to recommend and then, obviously, city council will make final decisions on anything that we'd ever present.
Can I ask one quick question kind
Yep.
of to this whole thing, in the current, how much, is there a way of kind of knowing how much our lack of ERUs is holding us back? Because again, that's a, correct me if I'm wrong. 8-year plan probably before we're out of this.
Well,
I
but
mean,
keep in mind that we're doing work right now to try to unlock an interim amount of ERUs, right? 190 more.
Yeah, but
With some going to commercial,
Yes, a lot.
so hopefully that piece could roll into
Right.
some of that.
right, but I'm just saying like, that's a lot of stuff, but really where we're to a little bit of point. Is, I think a lot of those are probably gonna go pretty quick in different ways. But I think really where we need to be looking at is instead of where we can capitalize, where can we capitalize in 8 years?
Mhm.
That's just a different thing, because I don't think. And some of that to even the urban renewal money usage. What's gonna get us a return in, what fixes us until we can get down to that 8-year road? Does that make sense?
So an example would be to have it shovel ready. Cause some things take 8 years to get shovel ready or whatever for an area that was picked by the city. To be able to say, hey, you know. Because businesses want to come in and already, so one of the things was, we were always going for the Skipper Lundin properties. Like, well, some business will come in and build that road for us, right? Well, no business was coming in to build the road, but if the road was already built, the businesses had a much easier chance of having funding from it, from banks and those type of things, because they didn't have to wait 2 years to build the road to get through, you know, they just had to pay the SDC fees that were already used to build it, right? And they'd much rather do that. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, in our case here is we have that, we need the areas.
Well, but that cost us $15 million.
It did, and
Okay,
we're capped
and we're
that
paying
year.
for all that,
Yeah.
and our streets are in, you know, so I guess what I'm puzzled by, because were you did you hear about the Troutdale, were you in that Zoom meeting where we heard all about the Troutdale development? There behind the mall, were you in on that?
I remember hearing about it. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was from a meeting or.
Okay,
not, but-
well, maybe John, you're probably familiar with it. You know, they have a great economic director there in Troutdale, and they worked with a whole bunch of different partners to have a firm come in and do a master plan for the area behind the mini mall, the Doutland Mall. And there was a lot of challenges because you got the train tracks that limits access across them. You need access down through basically the middle of the outlet mall. So you're gonna have to close a business and put a road through the middle of it. And that was all controversial. But what they've got is they've got a proposed hotel, proposed condos, proposed commercial, Riverwalk, park trail stuff. And they then did some sort of a kind of RFP to kind of have somebody come in there and buy that and develop it. And they got somebody to do that.
But it's called the Confluence.
Yeah, the
Who owns that
confluence.
land?
Huh?
Who owns the land?
The city does now.
And I think that's to the point is.
Cause the city owned it,
city
they could
bought
do
the
that.
Land, made it shovel ready, came up with a map,
They
which is
actually
exactly what we're
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
they didn't do it shovel ready.
They
But
did,
they-
do so
They had the
you're
infrastructure.
both right. They did like mitigation work because it was a brownfield area. So
Right,
they
they did
did
some
invest
mitigation.
that money.
Cause no one
Then
else
their-
would.
Their idea was to do, after a whole bunch of planning, they put together essentially like an RFP, like, here's what we want to see.
Right.
Now developers come bring us your proposals, and then they would
Yeah.
choose from among the
Yeah.
proposals.
And so that's kind of, yeah.
And provide a bunch of
Yeah.
economic
I mean, it's
incentives.
like what we
and-
did with Bell 362nd. Okay, we put in the $15 million road, now come and build it. And so,
But we don't own the land, that's the problem.
Well, we don't
Which I
need
think
to.
is what Jeremy, and I know that's what I'm seeing is exactly that, Gavin.
That's
but-
the idea.
But the city has to have that ownership so that they not having to try to get 6 different landowners or whatever it is to sell their
Mhm.
pieces.
You
and
can't
then
put an RFP out for
Yeah.
property you don't know.
You don't know.
Right.
So you.
well, but what
And the
we've done with Bell
350.
362nd, though, we've kind of talked about what our vision is there. And so then, and we put $15 million and gave all those landowners a big, huge gift.
Well,
And so now they're the ones who are kind of be selling to the different businesses and getting it developed.
And we have no lever against that though. That's the thing. It's-
Why do we need to have a
Do we
level?
know
Because we
if they
don't
are
get we don't
trying
have
to
any
sell it
say in what
that
we,
way?
To get it
what's gonna
done.
go there.
What's that?
We don't have any say in what's gonna go there. To a point.
one area like
I
in
think
Troutdale.
we can influence it though.
You can, yeah. I mean, putting in the infrastructure is the second best thing you can do. Owning it, and then having the infrastructure, the best thing you can do, right? Like, I think the case here is really focusing on our, the first challenge that I see is just focusing on this inner core here, right? And really identifying, coming in with our map and sitting down and saying, okay, this actor, this owner wants to transact, this one needs help, this one we're gonna have to use code. So we need to kind of come up with that
That's the
game
start,
plan.
yeah.
So what is our 5-year game plan for in this quarter and how are we gonna move these parcels forward, right? And that's to the point where you need different tools. The industrial property, having the infrastructure is a great investment. What we need to do now is try and, think about like, should that maybe be within your urban renewal boundary so you can provide some test fit or conceptual fits to help work with those property owners, just say like, this industrial building will fit here, here's the route and here's the number of ERUs. And then they have it, so anyone coming in to look at that, working with the broker can have a clear pathway to see like, oh, this will work, the city's already looked at this, right? So that helps to kind of make that next step where, you know, Troutdale was able to acquire that because it was a brownfield site that needed to be cleaned up and they were able to get EPA dollars. And that's why I go just, they'll say, you know, there's just different ways, each property has different actors, different ways it comes about from that standpoint there, so. You're all right, it's just a number of different tools to really make it come together, so.
Can we make sure we get through your
Okay,
agenda
yep,
here
okay.
and because I love debating about all this and talking about it, and I can go to midnight, but we don't want to do that.
All right. So I think that the main thing we, you want to put,
Sure. Bear with me, Jones.
I go to those, I think we've talked a lot about we talked about business communication and vacancy. I have a clear understanding of what you want to see from that there. I'll reach out to the individual owners, work with staff, we'll come back with some recommendations on a strategy for that there. And then we could,
Identify.
identify them all, we'll get a map, and then we could look in here and maybe, you know, that meeting, we can bring pizza in or something, you know, like go over that one.
And I think too, while you guys are working, when stuff comes through, if you don't mind emailing it to us, you don't have to wait until the meeting. Like, I wouldn't mind having some of this stuff ahead of time to like prepare to the
Okay.
meetings.
Yeah. I would,
Yeah, do a little
definitely.
research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, be able to read the minutes before the meeting.
The sewer moratorium, the cities.
It's on the website, huh?
I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, all this is on, if you go to the meeting, it's
Okay.
at least what, 5 days ahead of time?
Didn't know that.
All this.
I think
We
everyone's.
can email it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing is the industrial land development strategy there. And that's what I was kind of just talking about is, you know, I think, you know, focusing on the vacancy core in the public realm, those were council's like really important goals and vision to think about. Looking at the new urban renewal area, and like what are some of the ways to you know, boundary, what funding, what kind of programs, that kind of helps with the inner makings. The industrial land development strategy, I think is an important one to think about because just to your point, if it's an 8-year game, we're kind of looking at, right? To really understand like, what it would take to fit something there, what it takes to develop something there, just the timing from that standpoint. There may be, you know, who knows how the ERU is gonna play out in the next couple of years, right? So I think that's important just to be able to, again, work with those property owners. Find out, you know, what are their intentions? Are they willing to transact? Bringing awareness to the commercial brokers, industrial brokers in the area. And then finding a way, again, I'm a big believer in just having a test fit so like people can see what would fit on their property. You work with the city, brokers see that, owners see that, operators see that, they know there's a clear pathway, right? So when they can see that, you know, 120,000 square foot buildings will fit on here. There's the capacity for the sewer and water, here's how, you know, access in and out from the highway there, that, you know, they see all that connection there, so I think, you know, really. And then the last thing I think we talked about was Rogue being on their kind of relocation there was one of them too, right?
What was that?
The Rogue manufacturer relocation system there too, so.
So,
I was just gonna say, I just quickly threw the zoning.
yeah, thank
map up.
you.
Yeah.
That's what,
So
just
the
looking at,
red,
yeah,
so we talked about 362nd and Bell.
yeah,
A lot of that land is, that red is,
commercial.
was it C2, isn't
Yeah,
that?
C2
Yeah.
general commercial.
And then you were talking about industrial land, John, so that's kind
Yeah.
of, and especially that heavy industrial is on the far west end of town, it's that light purple.
But it's also the I2 stuff, the darker purple there is the Rogue. But it's also, you know, so we're already kind of doing some short-term considerations for how we can get the Rogue up and running with the alternative sewer system. And then in anticipation of the 190. But what also kind of comes into play is there has been, you know, like, for example, the stuff that's to the south of the Fred Meyer, the red there.
Yeah,
You know,
sorry.
that's kind of more, it's more like, you know, you've got that light industrial park, which is the blue. And so there seems to be a lot of variability and allowances for what can happen in the blue versus the dark purple. And, you know, one of the things to be considering in the future is what's allowed in these areas. What do we want to see, I guess, you know? And then definitely, obviously, the light purple to the west is the heavy industrial. So how, you know, what are we talking about? What do we want to see? How do we engage the possibilities there?
I1 is closest to commercial, right? Like as in the styles and those type of things, right? That'd be that dark purple. But I don't believe that's in the urban renewal district, correct?
Correct.
And when I say that is, I just remember council saying, you know what, how can we use urban renewal money to help with some of the design and those type of things? So just keeping in mind that the other stuff would have to come from general fund.
But all commercial is part of it.
It is, but I1 is industrial.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's that kind of like,
So where your building is at is an industrial.
Right.
And he was wanting to
Yeah.
change that into commercial, and that's why they're doing that different look on the building that's taken 10 years.
Can we poke him to hurry up on that?
Well, he's coming in Monday night
As a
for
matter of
an
fact,
So
extension.
can you poke him and
But-
not give him quite as long of an extension?
Okay,
Maybe a short
so-
one?
I mean, you know, in fairness to him, it's a lot of buildings. And so,
I understand. that.
um,
I've been dealing with it.
and you know, he was dealing with the same thing with the prices after COVID and what that costed. But, you know, just for an example, and
I
this
just
is
want to be
where.
careful we don't get in
Okay.
anything you're gonna be discussing at council in a meeting that was.
No, no, I'm just
just
saying that, you know.
Protecting you all.
No, just kind of what I was gonna be saying about it is that when, you know, that's an example, and I did talk to him about the opportunity. For example, we built the Smoky Hearth gazebo thing because we set aside some general fund money to fund some of these needs outside of the urban renewal district because
For us too.
it was, you know, it was a fairness issue, but it was also a needs issue. And so having this purple, when he's, you know, those things were just kind of that industrial pole barn looking buildings. And what he's done is really, you know, fixed them up and made them look nice and be much more attractive for a variety of businesses. So I think that to the extent that we can, you know, find projects like that to help fund, not fund completely, but to help fund, it really does make the vacancies, you know, reduce the vacancies and increase the, you know, potential for those to be, you know, occupied. So. I'm
And one of
excited
the
about
reasons
that.
why he wanted to do that was because then he can have other types of businesses that included what some of those businesses he wanted in that. It doesn't automatically put you into the urban renewal district by changing your zoning, though.
Right.
You still have to go in front of that whole piece, which is a bigger process on that, just for clarification. But moving on,
Yeah, so I think like, if you look at the industrial land development strategy, right? I think, you know, for the year, again, these are something for a work plan for the year, I think like. Strong messages on the vacant parcels and the public realm in that area and the urban renewal, like. I think, you know, through the year, it's just thinking about like, you know, your industrial land development strategy, you know. What is the, you know, site assessment, looking at some of these, identifying these parcels, you know, the light industrial, heavy industrial, commercial. Should there, you know, maybe be a change in some of that zoning? What is some of the technical assistance that could be identified from this group that could help to be talked about with these property owners? And then really trying to help them, you know, find that solution to be able to move those parcels forward, right? And telling that story and then understanding like the, you know, the timing for the sewer, right? So I think, you know, if I kind of see like, as we're evolving through this year, working on these vacant parcel, getting that understanding there, you know, what kind of tools do we have within urban renewal? You know, what's the public realm as far as the banners, the signage, you know, getting that is important, you know, within this quarter when you're coming through here. And then, you know, maybe it's the fall, we take a look at looking at the industrial land development strategy. We can come back and talk about that, because I think you guys meet every 2 months or 3 months we're thinking about here. So-
typically too, was
So,
there,
yeah.
we had an extended pause here for a while, but trying to rectify that.
When we're
So-
speaking about how often we're meeting,
Yeah,
can we discuss where the choice of the second Wednesday of the month? The reason I'm asking is because that is the chamber's only after hours event. And lots of times we are up the mountain or elsewhere. So, and I know we've got a few of us here too that are with the chamber, but I have to be there because it's my job. So I don't want to miss any meetings either. So, and our September one happens to be up at the resort at the mountain. So we're actually doing a karaoke thing up there for that one.
Yeah, no,
At the Mallards.
no, I appreciate that.
So that was my only, it's the only one that I have any other day time would be great for me.
Yeah, we can definitely take that,
Okay.
discuss that.
Okay,
Yeah, I
sorry.
appreciate, no,
I don't want
it's
to
all
be
good.
that one person.
We aren't gonna get everybody.
I know it's not all about me, so.
No, but I mean, we try to adjust that, but yeah, not. We have a lot of members, but it's not, like I said, it's still a piece of it, but
Yeah,
Okay,
um,
thank you.
I know, July and August, we just never get anybody here.
Right.
And then they try to cancel council meetings and things like that, because you only have 4 days of sun, so.
Right. Yeah, we don't do any meetings in July either because of that.
So. Um,
so Jeremy, I think the work plan for the year is, I'll bring in each time we meet some business updates there. We know the city's working on, doing strong communication on the sewer moratorium. We've talked to the vacancy strategy and the outreach there. Urban renewal updating, doing the modeling there. Public realm, importance of, finding some new banners and looking at the signage from that standpoint there.
Jeff, I just sent you those banners because I do want to show these other folks.
I think it hasn't come through yet. I'm trying to check
Okay,
it.
all right.
And then the other thing I just put on there, some EDCs, there's opportunity for subcommittees or leads, or someone wants to work on like the banner realm, or it doesn't even have to be a committee, just. It's nice if some of you, when I'm out there doing the work, if you're passionate, Mayor, about the banners, if that's something like, I can share that and then I, bring that back to you all to kind of look at, from that standpoint. I'll just put that out there sometimes too, because some of you might know. Maybe you're at the brewery, all the property owners come and have a beer and oh, that's so-and-so, you might have contacts with some of the folks, so that if you feel like you're kind of connected, one of these, just let me know, or however you want to kind of do that there. So I try to always work with the board members.
Did you get yet?
Keep refreshing, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a list of the vacancies that we know about anywhere?
First, subject to do, so, yeah.
Well, we
used to
we
have-
what I did is I made a spreadsheet for all the ones that are on the website, city website. And then I added a bunch on there. I don't have it all filled out, and then I looked at Redfin or whatever, one of those, to see what else was for sale. So I'll send you that spreadsheet. I just did it
Yeah, I
yesterday.
think what would be nice is to, we'll put together like a map to show you, kind of that core.
Yeah.
And then who the parcel owner, what the status is, and then, city has some, they've done a good job with, like you said, with some of the contacts. Some of it's like second or third generation. And then, what are the issues? And I think that's kind of like our next meeting, I think, is just kind of talking about, because we're gonna see different actors in different ways, right? And I think that could be kind of, and we'll bring in some suggestions and then we can kind of talk about it from
Finding
there,
out
like finding out like,
why they are.
why they're not wanting to transact, what help they need, or they just absent and they're third generation kids and they don't care, right? Because
I just know some of the buildings, I don't know all of the buildings, and I don't know barely any of the reasons why. I'd love to have it summarized, so as I
Yeah.
look at it, I
Yeah.
can understand.
yeah, exactly, yeah, I spent some time talking to them out here today, and just,
Oh, okay. Wait, let me just send you again.
Can
I
I-
sent you the wrong version.
Say one thing, ask one question.
Yeah.
Clackamas County had a property database that you could go in and look for properties. and
yeah,
making
we'll
sure was
access
on
that,
there.
we'll pull out from.
Just I'm wondering if that was still,
Yeah, we'll go through their
available.
GIS, we'll do some data mining on that.
but I mean, it was
So-
not just a
PDF
GIS,
version.
it was an actual.
Yeah, it's, we can
site
get
and
in through that, and
commercial.
pull some, we'll have to get, Town Jeff to give us the blessing and go in and get some, but that's, that information will be helpful for us to kind of make some.
But this was a public website.
Yeah, I can go to the public one too,
So,
but
I
I
didn't
could do a little to see where they're at on their tax payments too.
Okay,
What we see sometimes is these, these people won't pay their taxes for 2 years and then they'll come in right at the end and they'll true up, right? And that is speaking and just, so you got all kinds of games back here with these abandoned property owners. And I'm not saying they're good or bad, it's just, and some of them just, it's too big of a night, it's too big of a project for them to think about even going through doing it, so.
I think it's important to reach out to the the bigger family, the second generation folks, because yeah, I mean, some of the owners are,
Well, and I
Yeah.
think too, like, one of the things to come out of this too is like. You know, a lot of cities, and I'll just put this out for you guys to think about when you talk about it at the next meeting, but like. You know, maybe what you find on this is, you know, you find that, hey, we're gonna need to put some kind of, you know, more strict code enforcement of fire equipment or. Tax, or you're gonna need some, or we're also got these incentives, but then. But then like having a, you know. A business appreciation event for the business folks and. And then having them come and having a panel and just talk about our findings and saying like, you know. This is what's happening, you know, these have been absent for, you know, this many years and for example, we could have someone from Redmond come and talk about, well, here's what we did. You know, our urban renewal agency bought the building, repositioned it back. And this, and we could be talking, the city's looking at doing this, right? We've done our investigation. Here's what we're finding. Here's some of the steps that we're gonna be, but making sure that, you know, I mean, the business community, I think, would be on support of like, hey. They want to see it activated because, you know, synergy within our community is better, right? So.
Right.
I think maybe thinking about like, as you get this, maybe like a fall event would be to have a. Business appreciation and talk about some of these things that the city could think is. Economic Development Board is thinking about and moving that forward, right? Just to bring the awareness to, you know, because then people start, you know. It just helps sometimes, or in something, you know. So something to think about.
I think they would appreciate that a lot.
Maybe appreciate it and then sometimes, you know. You know, maybe it's time to realize that they need to transact, right? Or I need to, hey, do you want to buy this or, you know, or. It's just synergy sometimes to get on that aspect for things. So.
so these banners, Hans will recognize these are kind of just copied from what we did up in government camp TIP. And so here's, you know, and these are just conceptual, you know, just finding really good photography to feature our best spots, destinations in town. Having these hanging on both sides, Proctor and Pioneer, they can repeat, so you know, because they're going by at 30, whatever. So the actual photos will probably be something else. And this was before Cedar Park got built, was when I drafted these up. So, you know, obviously they're just conceptual, but you know, which sites we decide on, what the photos are, what the logo is, all that stuff is up for debate. But it's just kind of showing, you know, really highlighting the great destinations that we have here. And then mix that with the destination signing that we really badly need, that John had kind of identified the need for also. You know, where is Cedar Park? Okay, you know, that sounds great. How do I get there? And so really trying to kind of market it to all those people driving through. And this is a project that we can also, you know, work with the chamber on to kind of help them, you know, kind of fund some of their time to help pull this project together. So I think it's a real win-win, and combine that with the destination signing project, that would be really helpful. I think that's kind of one of those real easy, short-term things, not a lot of money, but a lot of, you know, bang for the buck. So just to give you an idea.
Great pictures.
Okay, how I do it as a family, if I'm driving by and see that and say Cedar Park, first thing I'm doing, putting it in my GPS.
Yeah.
There is Cedar Park Base Camp.
Yep.
And then Sandy, Oregon, but then there's Cedar Park in Sandy, Oregon, back off of Gary, and there's a place for Cedar Park right here.
Oh, great. No, I'll
So-
go fix that. Yeah.
It's, yeah, so just right.
Yeah, I did the Google one for the right park. I don't know.
Well, it says Cedar Park Base Camp, you have to have that whole thing, but if
Oh,
you're just
yeah.
looking for Cedar
Oh,
Park,
okay.
you're
yeah,
gonna go to
right.
some house
Right,
over.
okay. Okay, so.
And the cedar tree,
Some Yahoo, okay,
I
I'll get
just-
that fixed.
I was just thinking,
I'll
well,
report it
how-
as a problem. Yeah.
there's putting the signs and where you go,
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
when you hear about it, like,
Right.
I don't know which way to go,
right.
I'm just gonna put it on my,
Because there's Cedar Park Gardens by Mining Memorial.
Yeah.
so anyways.
Okay, I'll get that put in. Thanks.
Yes, and I like to get in on time at 8 o'clock and where are we at? We ready?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you for the first meeting and, you were gonna pick what, September, we put September 10th, but it sounds like maybe a
We maybe need to
9th or
relook
11th,
at,
look at the.
look at
the
a
date.
little bit
Okay.
different date and we'll come back to that.
Wednesday works well, maybe just move it up for later a week or something. Or month.
Yeah, if we-
Yeah, we'll look into that
Yeah.
there, so. Appreciate that. I want to appreciate and say thanks to John.
Yeah.
Coming
Thank you,
aboard.
Thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to have John. We worked closely together at the BRCs and he helped get that going. So
Yeah.
yes, I was so excited to hear he was the one coming.
Yeah, it's been great talking to him on the phone and his energy and his knowledge and, you know, that type of thing. When you hear consultant, I always kind of like, oh, where are we, you know, but no, it's been great just
Yeah.
chatting with you the few times I have, the knowledge, the background. So I appreciate that. We
Thank you.
look forward to working with you some more. So, well, at that, I will adjourn the meeting.